So the next definition is backset, and backset's a great definition. It means a lot of things, a lot of different things, even though most people just think of it as meaning the edge of the door to the center of the hole for a lock. You know, what's the backset of the lock? 2 3/8 or 2 3/4? Turns out it means more than that, but it's all just pretty much a derivative of that base understanding of what it is. But the term backset is used in different ways. So let's switch to the screen view and we will dive into the SDI definition of backset.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
Okay, backset. The distance from a cutout or datum line for a hardware preparation from a defined datum of a door or frame. It's a point of reference or a starting point is what datum refers to. It means what's the origin, at least that's kind of what it means to me. Where am I starting from? And you know, the datum's always important to know. What is your origin point? So they're going to give us flush bolt and hinge and lock and strike in terms of backset definitions. I'll more clearly define this and I'll add another one. So let's start with flush bolt. The distance from the center line of a lock edge of a door to the center line of the bolt, shown on beveled edge door. So, you know, in terms of the backset of a flush bolt, sure, you need to know what that is when you are drilling a wood door for a flush bolt. You need to know where to put that drill bit, right, in the top or bottom of the door. That's really important to know. If you're prepping a hollow metal door, or the factory is, they need to know where to have that tab, that guide tab welded. So that dimension from the edge of the door to the center of the hole is the backset. Okay, we're going to skip down and look at the lock definition as well because it's very similar. The distance from the center line of the lock edge of a door to the center line of the lock face prep. The distance from the center line of the lock edge of a door to the center line of the lock face prep, shown on beveled edge door. So what they're saying is here, the edge of the door, yeah, the lock edge to the face prep. So the edge of the door to the center line of the prep. That's your 2 3/8, your 2 3/4. That's where that's coming in. Now, let's define that a little further in the sense that you need to know where to prep something based on its datum or its origin point. So a lock backset's going to be 2 3/8, 2 3/4, 2 inch, 1 inch, 31/32, 5 inch, 3 3/4, 7 inch, 9 inch. It can be lots of backsets, lots of definitions. Everything I just mentioned are all lock backsets, and if you add extension links or have custom locks made, you can achieve quite unusual lock backsets. 2 3/8 is considered typical for residential, at least historically. I think that's kind of turned into 2 3/4 nowadays as a result, possibly of rosettes getting larger. 2 3/4 is the standard for exterior doors in residential and all doors commercial, unless you're dealing with specialty backsets like 3 3/4, like you'd have on locks like this, but also hospital latches. Speaking of hospital latches, 5 inch are very typical. There's a story that was shared with us. A very famous, well-known NBA basketball player that everyone knows who he is, ordered, when he built his home outside of Orlando, which is one of the teams that he played for, he ordered all of the backsets 3 3/4. It's just because his hands are so large. Needed more room, basically, to move the lock over. And you have to be really mindful of backset when it comes to other items that you might bump into, especially with things like panic devices and window cutouts, trim, levers on doors, meaning what's the placement of the center line of the lock in relationship to everything else around it. You know, if you have a 4-inch wide stile, you need to think about. So that comes into play with mortise locks or just a lock with a rosette. If you've got a 2-inch backset, a 4-inch style, and you're trying to put something on there that's 2 3/4 backset, the diameter of the rose probably won't permit that. The same comes true when you're thinking of aluminum storefront. How wide is the style? Is it narrow style? Is it medium style? Is it wide style? How much room do you have to fit everything in? But it's not only drilling a hole through the door, but it's the associated paraphernalia like a rosette or like the return on a lever. You know, is that going to bump into raised molding? So the backset has everything to do with not only what the reference point of the prep is from its datum, as they say, or its point of origin, but how does that affect, how is that positioning going to allow the lock to work successfully or less successfully, depending on the conditions. So you have to be mindful of what backset you're using. Back in the mid-20th century, 9-inch, 12-inch, 18-inch were not uncommon backsets to put locks way far back in the middle of the door, even though you'd see a 2 3/8 backset on the deadbolt. Hospital latches or those applications are 3 3/4 or 5-inch. 7-inch is not unheard of either. So all of that can be done. Now, flush bolt and lock we're considering together because of what's happening right here. They mention it, shown on beveled edge door, but they're not telling you exactly why that's important, and let's do that now because it is important. It's really important. So what I'm drawing here is 4 door styles. Square edge, rabbited edge, radiused edge, beveled edge. Doesn't really matter what you have, and that's because the backset is from a unique datum point or origin point on all of these doors. It's really important to know that the backset is referenced from the center line of something. So if you were to drill a door viewer that had a backset of 17 7/8, because your door is 35 3/4, you could call it backset. You measure 17 7/8 from this side of the door and 17 7/8 from this side of the door, that hole is going to be straight through. You try that on this door and your holes are going to be off. Okay. What's the backside of this door? Is it here? Is it here? Turns out it's whatever whatever the center line of the door is. That's what it is. It's also really important to know that they define the bevel as 1/8 in 2. So for every 2 inches of door thickness, the distance from this point to this point is 1/8 of an inch. So you can kind of in your mind's eye calculate the difference between the high side and the low side of the door when it's 1 3/4. You know that you're going to have to split that. It's going to be about a 1/16. It's going to be about a 60th less than a 16th. A very small amount less. But you have to be really mindful when you hook the tape measure on the edge of the door where you're going to. And that's why they define it as the center line of the door. Now, the other reason that that's important to know is the more modern definition of backset, or I should say the more modern 1/8 in 2. If you looked in a Yale catalog from 1895, and I have those, or Corbin Russwin, their bevels were more than 3 degree. That is actually what this is. This is 93 degree. That's 87 degree. That's 1/8 in 2. Their bevels were much heavier. I don't know what degree they were, but they were more than 3 degree. The concept of why this is important is because they're telling you we don't care how thick the door is because the backset's from the center of the thickness of the door. If you've got a 2 1/4 inch door, great. That's 1 1/8 from here to here or from here to here. It's half of the thickness of the door, assuming your lock's being installed in the center of the door, and It isn't always installed. It could be biased to one side or the other if you have an unusual thick door. So that's really important to know that you're measuring from the center line of the thickness of the door, not from one edge or the other. You know, you'll get away doing it correctly if you're kind of doing this, because hardware is actually somewhat forgiving. But sooner or later, you're going to do that door viewer, and there's no way to fix that, because the inside trim on a door viewer isn't going to allow you the amount of margin necessary, because that hole is really off. Really off. And you discover it as you're going halfway through the opposite side of the door. Let's look at the other definitions here now. Okay, so before we get to Hinge and Strike, let's talk about another definition of backset. Backset could be this. I have a Dutch door. And it's got a shelf on it, right? I'm going to put a Dutch door bolt, surface mounted Dutch door bolt, to hold the top leaf to the bottom leaf. Backset, your hollow metal manufacturer is going to ask you, what is the backset of the reinforcement? Where do you want me to, meaning, let me back up, where are you going to install the bolt in terms of backset from the edge of the door to the center of the bolt, so they know where to weld in steel reinforcement so that you can install that bolt securely. So that's another definition of backset that's not included in here. Now, is the term backset correct for that application? I would say absolutely, because it's the datum to where you're installing it. Am I drilling holes? You are. You're drilling mounting holes. You're drilling holes for screws. So I would say yes, it's correct. Okay, now hinge. The backside of a hinge, an incredibly common question to ask someone. What is your hinge backset? And what that means every single time is this. You've got a door. Your door is prepped for the hinge. This is the side of the door. The backside is how much of the door you have not mortised away. That's what's left over. Your hinge then fits in here, right? What's left over? What have we not mortised away? Now that's really important to know, because calculations are done based on this. So let's take a look and see what that means exactly. Typically it's 1/4 inch on commercial doors, but it's not always 1/4 inch. There are some manufacturers that do 3/16. If you have an unusually thick door, it's going to be, the backset will be possibly greater than a 1/4 inch. Don't take it for granted that it's 1/4 inch, because it may not be. And the reason that that's really important is I did a job for a VA hospital for a customer, and his customer was the VA hospital somewhere in Maryland or Connecticut, somewhere in New England. And all of his existing frames had a 3/16 backset. So you've got to wrap your head around, gosh, what am I doing on the door if the frame has a 3/16 backset? And what I mean by that is his frame was 3/16. So depending on what this is, my hinge backset was closer to 1/8 of an inch. You make a door that's got a 1/4 inch backset, those doors are not going to fit those frames. So hinge backset's really important to wrap your head around. So hinge backset's also used to calculate, I had mentioned, and an example of when it's being calculated is in wide throw, and here it is. For hinge width formula, see page 7. Okay, we went past it. Here we go. The formula for determining the width of the hinge is door thickness minus backset times 2 plus the inset plus the clearance. And whatever that is. Whatever the answer is, it doesn't matter. The point is that calculating backset is important to know that accurately, and that is what the hinge backset is. Okay, that's what it is, and that's 2 reasons why it's really important to know absolutely what that dimension is, because had I provided on that job for the VA, those were existing frames. I should have pointed that out. All the frames were existing. New doors, new mortise locks, closers, stops, automatic door bottoms, 90-minute 3670 birch doors. Everything was fire rated. That had to be done correctly. Okay, so that's hinge. Now let's look at strike. Yeah, sure, that's important to know. I don't run into needing to know the strike backset very often. Strike. On a frame rabbet, the distance from the stop to the edge of the strike cutout, I would call that the stop face myself, and this is the soffit. On the door edge, the distance from the push side face sheet to the edge of the strike cutout. On a frame rabbet, the distance from the stop to the edge of the strike. So that's clearly this. On the door edge, the distance from the push side face sheet, okay, to the edge of the strike cutout. And what they're saying there is, if you have a pair of doors, if you've got an inactive door, hole, your 4 7/8 strike is sitting in here, right? That's the strike backset. I rarely bump into that, and it's because for us, what happens is the center line of the latch bolt, wherever that is, needs to correspond with the center line of the strike. And whatever the resultant backset is what it is. So I don't find often that that's a problem, really at all, because my approach is more so this. Here's your door. What's the thickness of the door? And what's the inset, if any? If it's hollow metal, it's probably about 3/32. Is the lock centered in the door? Great. That strike's got to be centered there as well. So if this is 1 15/16, you know you've got 1 3/4. You've probably got 3/32 here, 3/32 here. You can determine where that strike needs to be based on those inputs. And that's what I think of as strike, location of where the strike is. I don't ever mention a strike backset or measure a strike backset because I'm measuring it the other way. I think the most important takeaway from this is understanding the center line of the edge of the door. They're showing beveled doors, but we drew 4 common door types, door edge types. So that's really important to know what you're dealing with. In terms of anything else to mention about backset, we talked about reinforcement. I can't think of anything else, so let's move on to the next definition.
Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.